episode 57, right?
Episode 58.
I thought the one that went live today was 55.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
I think so.
Let me check.
The one that went live today was 55. 56.
And then 56.
I'm working on inserts for.
So therefore, welcome to episode 57 of the Carmudgeon Show. My name is Jason Cammisa, and this is Derek Tam-Scott.
And this is the catch-up episode.
Because it's episode 57.
Yes.
We hope.
Yes.
I hope you all got that Heinz 57 variety thing. Guess what?
Chicken butt.
Clap. He's getting so good at that.
Okay. What is the topic for today?
I don't know. I have a topic. You know, I love to read the comments and see what people point out. And one of them was like, Cammisa, go back to playing with cars because your interior design skills suck.
Is that really a
Somebody
comment?
was very offended.
Someone said that?
Yeah. Hold on. You're going to see behind the scenes here because I see I left a little cursor over there. So I'm going to move that over there so no one can see it. I think somebody was offended by the studio.
Are you offended by it?
I mean, I did it, but what they probably don't realize is this terrible thing is here to block the... I mean, I just think that looks ghetto. Like wires hanging down, and there's like...
The flowers, on the other hand.
Gorgeous. They're there to, you know, I don't know.
I don't think that's why people watch us. If people are concerned about the decor, then it's probably not the show for them.
Yeah. I feel like you shouldn't even be noticing. No one should be looking at either one of us. Certainly not me.
No, I think people watch for the inserts.
That's why. Like reading Playboy for the pictures. Yeah, you came up with a topic for today.
Which one?
And now you don't remember which one it is.
Is
See?
this the...
This is what I deal with.
This is...
Late onset dementia.
Yes. 100% accurate. This is the when people are like, how do I do cars for a living question?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. People do ask me that with some regularity, and it's like, fuck if I know. My path to doing this was somewhat irregular.
Does that mean you don't go to the bathroom regularly?
Yeah, that's why it's difficult to do this. I mean, what else
Metamucil.
happens when you're 95?
This episode of Carmudgeon Show is sponsored by Metamucil. It's not. But it does help. Ding. People all the time send me DMs and they're like, hey, I want to do what you do. How do I do what you do? And my immediate reaction is, really? I'm going to tell you how I do what I do so you can steal my job, you young whippersnapper? No. But I think that's not really nice of me.
I don't think that's also enough. It's not enough necessarily to know. I mean, you can give some general guidance, or I don't know. I'm speaking from my personal perspective about how I got here. Like, it was a very circumstance dependent thing. Like, it just sort of ended up happening.
Did it?
Yeah. I mean,
But did you lay the foundation for that?
yes, of course. This is like the question about how do you get lucky, and it's like can't guarantee.
We've gone from constipation to adult activities. This is a really bad
This is
episode.
off to a great
Can we
start.
stop? Can we stop and re-roll, please, and start without the clap from your adult activities?
I've been waiting
Is
for
it
that
still
to
called
happen.
that?
I don't know if it still was called that, but I am familiar with that.
Of course,
definition.
it was
In
40
its
years
heyday,
put-
yes, when I was first, never mind. So you cannot guarantee luck, but you can't, you can't guarantee that you get struck by lightning, but you can stand in a field with a metal pole during a thunderstorm.
That's what you're... Oh, we're back to that other topic. Okay. What you do in the field with a metal pole, Derek Tam-Scott. Yeah, you're totally right. You can lay the foundation. Wow. This is what happens when we record first thing on a Monday morning. Yeah. You know, we really should have Carmudgeon start your week out wrong with the Carmudgeon Show. Like, we should really push the fact that we launched this episode 8 o'clock on Monday, but behind the scenes, we don't usually record 8 o'clock on a Monday until this week. It was not really 8 o'clock, but it's near as makes no difference.
It's 8 o'clock in Hawaii, or almost.
It's 10:12 according to that clock. They both say 10:12. See, this is why I accept no criticism about this studio. It's got two matching clocks.
And they both have the same time.
With cords hanging down from them, so they're off camera, so you can't see. Yeah, you can and should and need to really lay the foundation for your success once you get struck by lightning, so to speak. Right? I mean,
No, this is before you get struck by lightning.
Yeah, sorry. So you can.
You have to go procure a metal pole. And you're trying so hard.
Yeah, the point is you have to prepare for the chance. You have to be ready for the chance that you get struck by lightning. So how did you prepare for the chance of getting struck by lightning by inserting a pole into your life?
Jesus Christ.
You started this.
When I was 16.
Oh. That's not legal in most states. I think you need to redact that.
So my first job ever, the summer between freshman and sophomore years of high school, I worked for our mechanic, and my parents had like British and Italian cars and German cars, and so our mechanic said like, why don't you just come hang out and work for me for summer? And so my brother both did this, and we were doing like brake jobs and oil changes and like routine maintenance on Alfa Romeos and Land Rovers and Jaguars and stuff like that. And then that company folded, and so the next summer I was like, what am I going to do? And there was a dealer in the Bay Area that was legendary. They'd been around forever and ever, and I got a job there detailing cars.
Hold on, back up. So were you not interested in cars before this date?
Oh my God, no. I was always interested in cars since being an infant. I mean, the story of my parents meeting, like my dad had an old 911 race car, and he had it listed for sale, and my parents met because my mom responded to the ad.
That's so cool.
So it was definitely inevitable that I would be a car enthusiast. And both of them obviously had interests in cars. My mom had 4 Fiat 124 Spiders, not at the same time. This was a reflection of the quality of the cars. She would use one up and then get another one. And she did that.
To your dad too? Sorry. Inappropriate.
And she had a V12 E-Type when they met, as
Jesus.
one does. And my dad had owned too many cars of interest to list. He has a great story about, this would happen probably in the 1950s, maybe.
So statute of limitations is
yeah,
expired.
it's fine. He had his first car was a 59 Impala that they put a Corvette motor in and pause traction. And he was potentially impaired while operating it during a snowstorm in Chicago.
Drunk or on drugs?
Drunk.
Drunk.
Oh, I don't know, actually. It's a good question. I assume he was drunk. And then hit a pole. And then
A metal pole?
A metal pole. See? It all
In a
goes
field.
back. I mean, Chicago is in a field, effectively. And he backed it out from the pole that he hit, and then it got stuck in reverse. So now he's drunk in the middle of the night in an Impala that's stuck in reverse. So he, of course, drove it across a significant portion of the city.
In reverse.
In reverse. How did I get on this topic? Anyway, my parents were both super into cars. And I was under the impression that we were not, I was told we could not afford cable. And so whenever I wanted my parents to buy something, they'd be like, oh yeah, we can't afford that. Despite the fact that they both had 911s. I don't know. I was a child.
We believed in Santa Claus at one point. Most of us, so, you know.
I did too, until my brother took me over to a globe and was like, look at the North Pole. There's just water there. And I was like, oh.
You can build a house on water. It's called a boat. Santa lives on a boat.
Okay. Well, that was how I learned Santa Claus wasn't real, thanks to my older brother.
Mean. Who's also into cars, by the way.
Who was also into cars, but like in a less esoteric way than me, for sure. So one of the things, whenever I would ask my parents to buy me something, the answer was generally no, except for if it was books. And so when we were at the bookstore, I would always be getting car books. So I just had tons and tons of car books, and that's why I now have the DTS Automotive Library that you periodically draw from.
Quite often.
And so I just read books and magazines just a shit ton when I was a kid. And so that, like, the guy that I subsequently worked for detailing cars, which was my first job related to cars, he said that when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I was in there and there was a Porsche 962. And he was like, how do you know it's not a 956? Because I announced that it was a 962. And I said, well, the wheelbase is longer than the 962 so that they could put the driver's feet behind the front axle line in a 962. And I was like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old.
Oh my God.
When I said this. So nothing has changed. It's like the quote from the movie Sabrina. What was Linus like as a child? Shorter. Is the answer. That was me. So yeah, that's, I guess, how I started out. And then but that was like a high school job. And I like went to school and graduated and got a real adult job. And I sort of looped back around to cars much later.
A real actual job, or were you still doing car stuff on the side?
I always was doing car stuff on the side, but I've got, degrees in engineering and stuff like that. And I felt like I should have a real job. So I worked for an aerospace company for 7 or 8 years, before doing car stuff full time.
And that's why you're such a plane nerd.
Yes. I mean,
So
I would buy airplane books as a child also. I'd buy airplane books and car books and train books.
I hate planes. I don't hate planes. I'm just afraid of heights, and I'm just a miserable passenger on a plane.
But you could be into airplanes without being into flying.
It's like being into cars and not being into driving. Oh, I like a car.
Do it.
Yeah, but I don't like them. Hold on, if they're listening. I love everyone. No, I don't.
That is There's been a lot of controversial statements this morning, but that one by far was the biggest load of bullshit of the day.
Yeah.
I'm actually missing the bullshit button right now.
I turned it. What I did was turn the air conditioning off because it's getting so cold that I'm bullshitting to keep myself warm. Yeah, no planes. I'm just not a fan. Like on a big jet, I can look down. I fly a lot for work, and did certainly when I was in the magazines. Look down. That's a big fall. I kind of don't even think about it. But like a single engine plane, oh my God, they're just there's a lot of shit going on and a lot of shit going wrong all the time. And I know how often old cars break, and so getting like an old Cessna.
Yeah, and it's like the paint's coming off, and it still has shag carpets and stuff like that.
I mean, at least they have to do the
annual.
I mean, there's
the requirements for annuals and overhauls are like, if cars were like that, it would be amazing.
That would be Germany.
Yeah, effectively. I mean, but like when you reach a certain number of hours in an airplane, you have to rebuild the engine. Right. And the overhauls are done on the basis of hours elapsed, not like compression or oil consumption or any metrics that are intrinsic to the engine. They're just like at 2,000 hours, you have to rebuild the engine.
Yeah, but that could be flawed too, right? I mean, you could have an engine that lasts 1,999 hours and then explodes on average, which would kill half of its.
I mean, yeah, that probably wouldn't get certified, but yes, that risk exists. I mean, there are mechanical failures of all kinds at all times, and like improper maintenance or putting in fuel filters backwards or like icing situations or whatever, or water in the fuel. Yeah. A lot of these things are on the pilot to check. Like there's a pretty substantial pre-flight list. This is not the topic for today.
Okay. So anyway, so you became an aerospace nerd professionally, but still was working with cars on site.
Mm-hmm. And just sort of like buying, I mean, the thing that I think most car enthusiasts do, which is like, oh, I've bought this shit box and now it's ruinous. And now I have to sell it and buy some other shit box that I somehow think will be different. Or, whatever. So that none of that was paid. I was paying for it, in fact.
But at the end of the day, you're still laying the foundation for being an automotive expert, right? You started as a kid reading everything you get your hands on. As soon as you were old enough to get your hands on the actual cars, you got whatever job it took to be around them, right? Yeah. I mean, I think this is a theme when I look at all of my friends who are professional automotive knowledge bases, which is basically, I think I wrote that description in like the Carmudgeon description that like I'm a award-winning, I think I wrote like award-winning automotive journalist, and you're should be award-winning automotive library or something. Some stupid comment like that.
Yeah, encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got my license at 16 on my 16th birthday, in a car that was, of course, a manual, because when I was 15 and a half, I bought a manual car, and my parents took me to get it, and my mom was like, "You're driving it home." And I was like, on the highway and on the bridge? And she's like, yeah, figure it out. It'll be fine. And I did.
That's awesome.
So that was...
Was that the first time you ever drove a manual?
No, I mean, I'd like sort of, practiced in the neighborhood in various cars my parents had, but it was definitely the first time I'd ever been on the highway.
That's pretty courageous.
Yeah.
Of them. I mean, you'd have been fine.
Quickly.
Yeah.
But it is, stressful for sure.
I did. I bet my dad. I think I was 14, and I said something to him. I'm like, I could drive to into town. We have a house in the middle of nowhere, and he was like, "What are you talking about?" We had an automatic Chevy Impala wagon that I think we mentioned a couple episodes ago, and he was like, "No, we're taking the truck." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is a Land Cruiser." I can drive it. He's like, really? I'll give you $50 if you can move it without stalling. Drove right into town. No problem. But I mean, I don't think he realized the extent to which I had been paying attention to every single movement he made while he was driving. He and my mom, because they both drove manuals. And so I just...
Had you practiced?
No. Huh. I mean, I'd go in the driveway and start the car in the morning to warm it up in the winter. But no, I got in. But the thing about that is it didn't have an e-brake. Two things that broke on that Land Cruiser in like the 10 years we had it was the clutch cable froze once and broke, or the choke cable and the parking brake cable. The only two things that ever broke. So it had no parking brake. And I remember I put it in reverse, just backed right down the driveway. And then now I'm on like a 10% grade and no parking brake. And I have to start out and there's a ditch, like a big ditch behind us. And he's like, oh, you fucked yourself up now. And I'm like, did I? And I just went. He was like, what the fuck? But I mean, I could see that, when he was doing it, you very quickly to an engagement point and then feather it. It worked somehow. The one thing I had never figured out in my mind how to do and hadn't practiced was a rev-match to downshift. And so going up one of the hills it was a highway, but it was a 2-lane. I was at full throttle in fourth and it was slowing down. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to have to go into third. And he's kind of like looking over and like, we're like 50, 49. I'm like, oh fuck, here we go. And it worked. Like that was, and motherfucker never paid me the $50, by the way.
That's okay. You got him back when you bought the Scirocco.
True.
With interest.
But tomorrow is my 25th anniversary with that car.
Congratulations.
I think that's a good thing. I mean, it's scary.
Oh, you invented the word invulnerablating a couple episodes ago. It's
genuinely scary. Like I don't even, now I'm like, I can't take it out today. What if something happens on the day before my 25th? It's so stupid.
I think you have to just be okay with the possibility that something could happen.
Mm-mm. No, of course not. I can't be.
I don't know. It's just like, at least you have the memories if something ever happens to it.
That's really not. Talk to your mother. Let me call your mom and be like, I'm going to, expose Derek to the fentanyl. At least you'll have the memories. She's going to be like, no, don't kill my kid. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, this is how you become a car person. You become overly attached to shitty Volkswagens that you screwed your father into buying. Okay, so after aerospace, you went full-time at
the same dealer that I had worked at when I was.
I love how you never mention their name. I love this. He doesn't. Don't do it.
Okay, I haven't. I left some out that the story was that I was detailing cars there, and then they were like, we have to do a better job of marketing cars because auction companies do a good job marketing cars, and we were sort of trying to compete with them for cars. And so they started doing better photography and writing descriptions that were more comprehensive. And then I started writing all the descriptions because I knew a shitload about cars and had like a formal education background that had a lot of writing involved in it. So I was a reasonably good writer. So then that sort of, which is like an extension of what I do now when I'm writing videos, is it's just a bunch of research, right, and learning and books and stuff. So at its core, I guess it's rooted in nerdiness. Well,
but what you just described was that you had laid down all of the background so that when lightning struck, i.e. when this dealer was like, hey, we need to market cars better, you could just step right in.
Yeah.
And that's the advice I give people. Go back in time and spend your entire life studying this. I mean, you want to know how to become an automotive expert? Become an expert. And you got to put the time in. There's no, of course, in this world, everyone, every YouTuber and whatever else thinks they're an expert because my favorite is DWA, Driving While Awesome, the podcast, which I love those guys, all of them. But there's a really brilliant tagline, and they're experts of automotive opinion. Mm-hmm. Genius, because you just see the experts and you're like, that's great. But you think about they're experts at having opinions. Whether those opinions are based in fact and knowledge is irrelevant. But that's what the sort of influencer generation has become. Everyone's an expert in their opinion.
Yeah. You talk about young journalists all the time. And I had this experience where, do I publicly recount this story?
Yep.
Fuck.
Not necessarily. We can change the subject if you need to. Okay.
There's just you need a certain level of, this is conversation we've already had actually about learning how to drive properly and being aware of what cars are doing and being, what does it mean when you say a car is balanced, for example, or what is steering feel, or like what is and isn't acceptable. And a lot of that comes with driving a lot of cars. And so in the course of working at a dealer, I drove a shitload of cars, and that's the sort of body of experience that you need to make judgments about whether this is good or bad. Because so many times, especially if someone's driving something that's different from everything else they've driven before, and it's like, oh, this is the first car from the 1960s you've driven. I think it really helps to contextualize stuff, because you could drive the very best car from the 1960s, and if you've never driven a car from the 1960s before, you'll be like, this is an absolute shit heap. Right. And you would not know that it is actually, like, objectively for the 1960s compared to everything else that existed, a really exceptional car. Mm-hmm. I mean, shit heap is relative, because in some respects it's much better than anything you get today, but in other respects, like the amount of finesse you need, or the technique, or like if you have cantankerous carburetors, like how do you drive around that and still drive smoothly? Like my Alfa is like this, and I don't notice it, but then if somebody else drives it and I see them doing stuff or feel them doing stuff, and the car is like bucking and it's not happy, and it's like, oh, you just have to, like, I don't know.
That comes from experience. Listen, that comes from experience with. So this weekend I drove a Mondial T, which is owned by a friend of mine, and we did a ghetto throttle adjustment on that car. Background is it has 2 independent fuel injection systems, 2 throttles, one for each bank of 4 cylinders, and has 2 idle stabilizer valves. So you have to balance the throttles to each other, or the idle stabilizer valves fight each other, and it's row, 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 and it does all this crazy shit. After we balanced it, he went to go drive it home. We didn't do it correctly. We just got it so it idle. And when he got it home, it's like a 20-mile drive. He said it stalled about 200,000 times. I mean, he was just like constantly fighting it in traffic. I drove it the reverse route now because he had knee surgery and can't drive, not one stall. And he was completely bewildered by this. And it's because I understand how that fuel injection system works. And he was probably, as I accused him, letting off the clutch at 3,000 RPM, which gives, with no flywheel,
so then there's
especially,
a lot of inertia of the motor,
of the
speed
fall
dropping.
and speed.
Yeah, and you have to
and
catch
it. Can't
it.
catch it. So
you have to catch it.
Well, either you catch it with heel and toe,
or you let the clutch out at like 1,300.
Bing. That's what I did. I just wait until you feel the nudge of an injector. The injector's kicking back on, then clutch in, and it got it. It's that experience level of working with miserable cars. I kept telling him, I'm like, however miserable this fuel injected car you think is, it's not broken. It's just out of adjustment. Once you learn how to drive broken carbureted shit, this stuff is easy. Child's play. And so that's what you can get into anything, having experienced thousands of old cars.
My cutoff is about 1920.
Yeah, but then before that, nothing's standardized. And that gets fucking weird. But everything after that, you get in and there's no stalling, there's no bucking, there's no you map out what's happening because A, you have an engineering background, B, you've driven thousands of cars and understand how they work, why they work, and how to drive around all of those things. And then you have the perspective of, oh, that's like this other car that's carbureted with Webers.
And you also have to learn what signs to look for. And when it starts to do certain things, you're like, oh, I know it's happening. This is how you adjust for that.
Right.
But these are cues that most people are not calibrated to pick up on.
Because they weren't reading about the theory of what went into that, like the engineering behind it. They don't have an engineering background. I mean, yours is not mechanical, but it's engineering, right? It teaches you how to think. And then you map your experience. And what all you've basically said is you've spent your life learning. That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess. In a nutshell. But it didn't feel like it because it was always out of interest, and it was like what I did for fun. People always joke about this about pilots, and I think this is 100% true. What flying recreationally or as like a general aviation person in a little Cessna is what someone who is an engineer does for fun. Mm-hmm. You're still engineering something. You're just engineering something other than what you engineer during the week. I mean, flying is like that. That's why being a good pilot is at its core. It's a lot of it is finesse and judgment and just knowing how, if I want to be at this place, at this altitude, this speed, I have to do this to get there. But all of that is just experience.
Physics it's physics and a physics engine running in your in your mind.
Exactly.
If you asked me to get in a plane, a single engine plane, with somebody who flies commercially for a living, or someone who flies commercially for a living and is a recreational pilot, there's no question you're going to get in the car with the person who does this for fun, because they've had their entire life has been about collecting information on this one hobby that, okay, they want it making a career out of it, but all of their spare time And what you do for work every day, 8-hour workday, the average person does 4.5 hours of substantive work. Or I'm sure there's been studies on this. There's a very big difference between that and someone who spends all their spare time reading books and learning and playing and tinkering. That's where the real knowledge comes from.
Yeah. I mean, it was never intentional, really. It was just like, this
Following
is
your
how
heart.
I want to be spending my time. But transitioning that into something monetizable, I think there's not a super clear path for that. Because what you're talking about is effectively meritocracy. Build it and they will come. If you build this expertise, then everything else will follow naturally. There's other stuff that probably has to happen in there as well.
Or, there's the lightning strike. All right. For me, for a second, my undergrad started out as mechanical engineering. I wanted to do crash engineering, or crash testing, safety engineering, or human factors engineering, ergonomics. Couldn't stand engineering. Couldn't stand the fucking other kids. I was just I was a little bit too silly and stupid to be around engineers all the time. Started taking psych classes because they were more fun. So I wound up my undergrad is a sort of triple major of psych, international business, and German. And then I went off and did an IT thing for 8 years. Started a company basically with some friends. And then when I was done with that, went back and got a law degree. I have a master's in law. Nothing has to do with cars. I mean, I have a mechanical engineering minor and a physics minor and a calc minor that came out of doing 3 years of mechie first. All of that just taught me how to think and how to analyze things in the same way that I'm sure that your civil engineering degree teaches you how to think. But law degree is a perfect tool to learn how to write because you have to be perfectly unambiguous.
Yes.
And that's one of the things about your writing that's very clear is you were in PR, right? Your aerospace job was in PR. And when I read your writing, it's ambiguous on purpose if it needs to be. And that's a PR's job.
Yes.
Side note, Matt Farah and the Audi RS3 was really interesting. It was ambiguous where it needed to be, and it's not possible to misinterpret something clear as day when it needs to be. Matt, who I love as a person and respect as a host and everything else he does, made a post about the new Audi RS3. Because Audi's PR team, how do I say this without saying it? Basically purposefully misled all of the journalists into thinking that this new all-wheel drive system, which is a replacement for Haldex, can send 100% of the power to the rear wheels, which it cannot. And so I got a bunch of phone calls from colleagues, which I'm proud that people thought to call me asking, wait, how does this happen? And it's not. This is the same old shit where it's, a rigid connection between the front and rear axles that can be clutched off, clutched or not. And at most it can send 50% of the torque to the rear wheels. Yes, if the front wheels are off the ground, then maybe all of the torque touching the ground would be coming from the rears, but there's no secret trick in this. But Matt got fooled by it. And the way that Audi phrased it was very, very clever. Matt was very pissed off when he realized it was like an Instagram commenter commented, sort of called him out on it. And he was like, no, they said it's 100%. And sort of then everyone kind of attacked him. He went back to the PR team who sent another purposefully ambiguous quote from the engineers to mislead him again. And then Matt went crazy and was like pissed off and made a whole post about, made a podcast about how disingenuous these PR people were. I agree with everything Matt said, except for one thing. It's not their job to tell you the truth. It's their job to spin it in the best possible way. And that's a subtlety of writing that comes from working in the PR firm, right? The Audi PR guys did their job. They completely fooled all the people. It's the job of the journalist to know enough to be like, that's bullshit, and call them on it. And so that's where I disagree with Matt. But it's an interesting skill set that you also have. And I've seen that in your writing where there are times I was called invagan things. Make it purposely a little bit vague because it's something I can't 100% prove. So you make it a little bit vague or then make it crystal clear. That, for me, was my law degree. That was the one that taught you how to bulletproof write something that's absolutely not subject to interpretation. And then I got a job running Automobile Magazine's website. And it was because the friend of mine who had previously been there and recommended me for the job said, listen, there's one person I think who could do this job as well as I did or better. And he ran an IT company, so he knows how a website works. And he's a walking encyclopedia about cars. Ding, ding. At that point, I was 30 years old. This is now 17 years ago this month. Actually, it's 17 years today.
Really?
Wow. Yeah. 17 years ago today, I started at Automobile. fuck, I'm old. Because I was 29 years old. Shit. But it was, I sort of got in the interview process and they were like, okay, so what do you know about cars? I'm like, hit me. Like, what you got? And their technical editor had sent a bunch of questions over. No problem. It was all just child's play stuff for me because I was an engineering nerd and I'd spent my entire life studying this stuff. And then the final thing was Joe DiMacio was the executive editor at the time. I think he was E. And he was like, listen, I need you to just write a review. Like, write something so I knew what your writing is like. And my primary job wasn't really writing. It was running the back end of the website. And I wrote something and apparently it was good.
But what subject?
It was Audi S4 versus M3, E46 M3, which was, that was the combo at the time. And I think...
Did you drive them or?
Yeah, I just driven them both. And my verdict was if you'd never driven an M3, you might quite like the S4. Great engine. The S4 was good until the RS4.
This is B5.
This is B5. Yeah. No, B6, the V8.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a V8. But anyway, all of those things, when lightning struck and the phone rang and it was, hey, this is Primedia, was the name of the company. They actually called me first about a Motor Trend opening. This is Primedia calling. We want you to run Motor Trend's website, which turned into Automobiles. I was ready. Having done 27 years, well, I'm 29 years old. When did you start reading car magazines? 3, 4?
Yeah.
No, I think I was 11 when I started. Totally obsessed with cars prior to that.
Where did that come from?
I don't know.
There were no outside influences that...
Fascinated with cars from the second I was old enough to talk. Apparently drove my twin sister and my parents crazy. Pointing out cars. Like when I was 4.
Yeah.
Could name every car on the road and bought a car when I was 11 was 10 or 11 was when I really started with the car magazines. We were not a book household. So there was not a lot of reading material available, but the magazine started it.
Yeah.
Quickly.
My dad has been subscribing to Road and Track since I don't know. He has magazines from Road and Track, a complete library of Road and Track, every issue that goes back to the 60s. But I imagine he started before that because he bought a Triumph TR4A new. That would be 63.
Wow.
And he had a not new TR3 because he had no shift lever. It had a screwdriver instead, which is...
That could have been a month old at that
yes,
time. Those things.
Very definitely could have been a month old. I'm going through the service records on my 61 Alfa Romeo right now, and there's stuff that happened when the car had 5,000 or 7,000 miles. We were like,
wow, we're not already.
Okay. That was already ready for replacement before 10,000 miles. Right. Cars were different back then. My dad said on British cars, you have to go around the car once a week and tighten everything.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know of cars that rusted out before the powertrain warranty, the 70s stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 years completely not roadworthy anymore. Just scrap it.
Yeah.
And thing had 30,000 miles on it or 20,000 miles on it. But anyway. Yeah, I mean, the natural curiosity started really early and then I started piling on. And by the time I was 12, I remember reading a Motor Trend thing and I'm like, these guys made typos. They're mistakes in the spec box. These guys are fucking idiots. And so that was where I was at 12, realizing not everyone is created equal. And so it was Road and Track and Car and Driver for me. And Automobile was all wine and cheese. I couldn't read that fucking magazine.
The Automobile didn't start until...
Automobile was 86.
86.
Which is about when I started really reading car magazines. And I just remember David E. Davis, the editor-in-chief and founder of it, was just very much an elevated, let's look at the whole car and let's have an experience with it and take a great car to a great place. At 12, I didn't give a fuck. I wanted the spec box.
Yeah.
I wanted 0 to 60 and where's the torque peak and why does this car have such a long stroke and just that nerdy shit. And Car and Driver was always my go-to. Still is. It's the only magazine I still read cover to cover.
Yeah, because they test so comprehensively.
Testing regimen the testing team is the best in the business. I mean, Motor Trend tests everything also, mostly as well. But I like Car and Driver's methods better, having seen the insides.
Motor Trend also has historically been less globally focused.
Yeah. I remember that until the early 2000s, there was the Car of the Year and then there was the
Import Car of the Year. But Car of the Year was won by imports at least twice before then. Speaking of...
What, when there was no other choice?
So one of these you should definitely know. I think it was 83 Motor Trend Car of the Year. GTI. Yeah. And then
But that was built in the U.S. That's probably how they got around it.
But this one, definitely not. I think it was 71 or 72 Citroën SM.
SM, really?
Yeah.
They got, going back, when I got the job at Motor Trend, I went back and looked at all the cars of the year and I was like, who got paid for the fucking Dodge Neon?
Yeah, or I thought the original Dodge Neon was kind of like a breath of fresh air. They were like, it's an American car that could like maybe almost take on the imports, and it's like spunky and has personality, and like it's kind of zippy when you get the twin cam. Like,
if you look at when it won Automobile of the Year, also, I believe, but I remember going through the photos, and I worked for Chrysler in the 90s. Doing displays at malls and special events and concerts and shit in Pittsburgh. And we had neons there. And I will tell you, the car that was in the photographs that won all the of the year awards was 100% not the production car. Different dashboard, different HVAC controls, different everything. It was a fucking cheater bullshit moment, the likes of which still happen today. But that's another episode.
Interesting.
All right, so back.
But yeah, I mean, PT Cruiser, for example, I think won at some point, and you're just like
fun looking.
I mean, now all I can think of is them piled on top of each other in junkyards. But I guess it was impactful in the sense that they were trying to bring something that was unique and fresh to the economy car segment.
Yeah, they stole a Chevy design. I mean.
Well, the Prowler stole a Ford design.
Right. The idea behind it was great. You put high style on something that's a piece of shit.
Yeah,
and
I mean, that's like
a great
the
design.
Fiat Cinquecento thing. It's just the idea that like an economy car need not necessarily be like a box.
A penalty
like
box.
Yeah, exactly. Like a Tercel or a Mazda GLC.
Yeah. I mean, look at how many people loved the original Scion XB when no one loved the other sort of Toyota pods that it was based on. And you put high style on something.
Or just distinctive. It doesn't even have to be high style. It just needs to be some element of like, we're going to make it different.
Yeah. I mean, when I say high style, I mean, at least someone paid attention to how it looked. And it's not like a blob in the driveway.
Is very amusing to me because that's just a basic given with most French or Italian economy cars. They have other shortcomings to be sure. But
at least
you look at something like, I don't know, what are some, I mean, the old Fiat 500s from the 60s and 50s. This happened certainly in the 80s. You look at like a Fiat Ritmo and there's all this crazy like design stuff. The door handle is a circle. Like, what? Why is the door handle a circle?
Because if you're going to be stuck with a shitbox, penalty box, pile of crap in your driveway, at least make it interesting to look at. And that's kind of the Italian way.
Yeah.
I love that.
I 100% agree.
All right, so back to that.
But interesting, you just don't know where that interest came from. Because for me, it's so obviously clear. I mean, that's why.
I mean, I think from my childhood, my parents.
We've talked about this. Did you come home from hospital when you were born?
My parents don't remember, and that's telling. I mean, I was just going to say.
About how they feel about parenting or about how they feel about cars?
No, I mean, look, they were really high. It was in the mid-1970s. My mother just had twins with there was no epidural, no nothing, because they didn't know how many babies were in there. Remember, this is before like MRIs and CT scans and sonograms and shit. They did one x-ray and they're like, we think we see two spines. I have the x-ray. It's like this big. It's wild. But they would not, for multiple births, they would not give her so much as a Tylenol. And she was in labor for 23 and a half hours with my sister, who has always been the difficult child and continues to be. I get to say this on a podcast and she can't defend herself. 23 and a half hours with my sister. And then she basically coughed and I flew across the room is my take on it. But they think it was a VW Squareback, but they don't really care. And then the first car that I remember was we had an AMC Pacer. Yeah, when I was about 4 or 5. And then from there it became cool. Then it was like a Saab 900 turbo for my mom, and my dad had a Land Cruiser. And then, that's later on. But no, the car thing, I was alone in that. That just was an intrinsic genetic.
Like, yeah, it actually genuinely seems genetic, which is strange. Yeah. I mean, because for me, it's so contextual. Like, I came home in a Series 3.
Could have been both.
Yes.
Series 3?
Series 3 XJ6.
Oh my God.
Brown.
You with a spoon up your ass. Silver one at that.
Well, my brother came home in a Fiat 124 Spider.
On the back parcel shelf?
No, my mom was on the parcel shelf and the baby was in the front. Because the only cars...
You're not talking about serious drugs. They had the 60s. That was really
yeah, exactly. And the only cars they had at the time were the V12 E-Type, which had less of a parcel shelf than the Fiat. The Fiat has what you would identify as a seat, but like no seat belts in the back. And so those were the two cars they had when my brother was born, which, and then by the time that I came along, then I guess they had been out of school for a little longer. And
had something with actual backseat.
Yeah, something with a backseat, which was the XJ. My dad had bought 2 XJ6s new before that. He had a Series 1, I think it was like a 68, 69, early Series 1 XJ6 as a sedan, and then he bought an XJ6C coupe new in like 75 or 6 or something like that. And so when they were like, we need a family car, my mom had an E-Type, and he was like, well, that seems like Jaguar should be the answer. He wanted a Maserati Quattroporte 3 because it had the quad cam with all the Webers. My mom's like, no, that's an ugly box. I don't want it. So they had an XJ. So they got the next most reliable and economical thing, which was an XJ6.
Almost come home from the hospital in a Quattroporte.
Yes, I could. I almost, but
yeah, but it wouldn't have.
My mom would
have
long
anyway.
Yes, that's right, because they bought the XJ6 in '83, maybe '82, and I was born in '87. So the Maserati would not have been
no chance.
Would not. It would have just been the torque fleet transmission, and nothing else would have been left. Speaking of rusting out early and just general failures to proceed.
But yeah, no, we have the same path then in that, and we started out probably for different reasons, but at the end of the day, we both just did research and got an education, both in terms of formal education, and then doing everything we could to learn everything about cars. And then for me, the final straw has been always, this is my hobby, but when I'm working, it's a very different thing. It doesn't really matter what I like.
You have to approach through the lens of what consumers expect and what else they could do with their money instead.
Right. At the end of the day, there are plenty of cars that I've given really, really, really good reviews to that I've hated, which is most cars, if I'm honest. I mean, and people say, well, why do you have the e-Golf? Why do you have your daily driver? Why do you have all these other cars that you drive all the time? The reality is, as someone who loves cars, I don't want to drive someone else's fucking car. Especially because 99% of the time, whatever press car that I'm there evaluating is something I would never choose in a million years. So what, I'm going to make myself miserable just because it's free gas or free tires or whatever else.
Is the gas supposed to be free? I paid for the gas.
Well, I mean, I don't return them fully full. If I use a quarter tank on a car, and I'm sorry, I probably should. But I don't care.
I mean, that's why when the opportunity to get a press car arose for me for the first time, I was like, I chose the Cadillacs because I was, what is the most exciting thing that genuinely interests me in this space? But I mean, your comment about giving good reviews to things that you didn't like resonates with me now, because the LFA was like that for me. It was a car I would never buy, but I learned enough about it and interacted with enough to understand what the appeal was and get why it's interesting. And I sort of highlighted those aspects of it. But to me, it's not, that's where you have to take the subjectivity out of it. Your own personal.
Go drive a Honda Accord hybrid and give me a review of that. Seriously.
I'd rather not.
Okay, well that's where I say to people, when people say that, and they say, then you're not going to be an automotive journalist.
Yes.
And that's no dig on you, right?
No, I 100% agree. Because I have no aspirations of.
I wrote a column on that car because it's so unbelievably importantly well engineered. And destroy 53 miles per gallon. Come on, this is years ago, so it might be 56. Whatever the fuck it was. For no amount of money, you get a car the size of a 7 Series and all these other things. I'm able to take my own personal interest out of there. And that's the most important thing. After you've laid the foundation by spending your whole life researching everything about and touching, driving everything you can get your hands on, understanding what's happening, not just saying, oh, that's a quirk, it does it. Learn how to drive around it, learn why it's happening, and then you can apply that knowledge to everything else you drive. Once all of that background 20, 30 years is done, then...
This is the 10,000 hours rule.
Right. But then you can start working on your craft of saying, this is what's important to this consumer or this car, removing yourself from it, and then telling a story. And that's, at the end of the day, what we both do in videos is tell a story. The Icons reviews are very not what I think about cars often, right? I'm honest about what I think about the car, but if you ask me as a friend, hey, what do you think? I fucking hate it. It's fucking not for me. What do I care, right? So I'll answer that question with my journalist hat on. So, according to this class of vehicle, it gets better fuel economy, but at the expense of interior space, whatever. But it's an interesting thing. How do you get to be paid for what you do?
Is that the space you most enjoy?
What, new car space?
Yeah, having that sort of being the arbiter of effectively of how new cars fit into the space relative to what consumers desire and expect from that category.
It's interesting. It's fun. It's learning. It's more research, right? It's trying to figure out and asking the car companies directly and the people involved, what are you trying to achieve? Perfect segue into next episode. I'm going to make you drive the Acura Integra that's parked outside right now, and we're going to talk about that. Okay. So there's doing the research and getting the background is the funnest part. The best part of my job is getting to interact with the people who made the decisions to get the car there and figuring out why they fucked up or why they didn't or how they came to this. You know, when you see things from the outside, a lot of stuff doesn't make sense. Like, why the fuck did they do this? Well, once you start to understand the engineering behind it, like I had somebody I think sent me a link to some YouTube asshole fucking influencer moron who's like, well, why didn't they change the shape of the taillight on Tesla? And that's what it was. It was Model S got a taillight upgrade, and he went on this rant about how Tesla would have never changed the shape of the taillight because it could have possibly influence aero. Okay, they can model that in 2 fucking seconds. Tesla didn't change the shape of the taillight because then they'd have to change the stamping, which is a very, very, very expensive part. You're talking millions of dollars of tooling, right? So you understand this intuitively. The people who are so-called automotive experts don't. And that's what drives me nuts when I watch these imbeciles on YouTube. Like, they're just like, oh, this spouted off. They don't know what they're doing because they've never taken the time to ask and learn from those engineers. And that's the most frustrating part of my job, is that there are so many people who think by the way, I'm not like putting myself on some high horse. There are plenty of people who do what I do, right? But I did put in the time to talk to engineers and to reach out to them today constantly and say, hey, what's going on here? Why did you do this? And all of the people who work for Car and Driver do that. For example, that's their job, but they're not influencers. That should be the favorite part of this job. Let me sitting in a car with Andreas Preuninger, shutting the door away from all the fucking PR people and getting the real answer on every decision that he made on the 911 GT3. If like that is like the subject of like porn for Jason. Like, that was the best moment I could ever spend with anyone. Here's someone who just created a fucking legend of a car. Like, this was 991.1 GT3. Why did you do the thing? Why did you choose PDK? There's a lot of stuff I won't talk about because there's internal politics in all car companies. I'm not talking about Andy Preuninger. I'm talking about all car companies. There's a lot of shit I hear that I just I'm not going to say because it's going to get the people in trouble who are fighting the good fight.
Yeah. And you want to not violate the trust that you have built with them.
Right. Because I want to be able to understand what the fuck is happening. And of course, encourage those car companies to make the right decision. But saying, hey, so-and-so told me that you fuckers fucked this up. It's counterproductive. But that's fascinating. What a crazy look into how there are heroes, right? These cars are magic. They're taking a bunch of steel and carbon fiber or whatever they're made out of and turning into something with a personality. Like, that doesn't happen with any other device. So the people who create that are my heroes. They're magicians. And I want to know the tricks. I want to know how they do that. And that's how you do that long enough. And I'm certain there will be somebody standing there with a paycheck willing to pay you for your knowledge. And you and I are proof of that. But there's no shortcut.
Yeah. Interesting. I still feel like there has to be an element of right time and right place.
For sure. You have to. But you can put yourself in that right time and place.
Yes, I have done that for sure. I mean, there's so many interactions. Basically, every meaningful interaction that I have had that has like led somewhere or had professional impact on me has been something where it's just like, I don't know, just interact with this person and get, there's no ulterior motive. There's no like strategy or like, how do I play this in my favor? It's just like, I don't know, it seems interesting. Let's do this.
Right. Well, there's
always worked.
Right. You go with what you're interested in, right? Secondly, you go with what works. I never had any desire to get involved in front of any camera ever, but I did a couple of videos while I was at Automotive and they worked. Great. Fine. I'll do video. And then I did videos for Motor Trend and they really worked. I'm like, all right, I'll just do that. I much prefer writing. It's a lot easier and I don't have to worry about how fat I'm getting. I mean, when you're, being a public figure is a weird thing, as you're probably starting to learn.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, getting stopped on the street or recognized in Costco, or like heaven forbid trying to go to a car event and you're just trying to look at cars. And this is so gripey. I mean, I'm glad that people appreciate the content and like our perspective. And I do enjoy it, especially because as a person who's sort of a little bit socially awkward, like having someone approach me.
A little bit?
Yeah, I know.
Sorry. I had to do it.
Having someone approach me makes it easier than me approaching them.
Right.
So I appreciate all of that. It's just, it's a bit of a change, but at its core, I believe as an engineering sort of mindset person, meritocracy to me is important. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of data points in the world where you're like, no, this is not merit driven. Like whenever I think about politics, for example, I'm just like, I wish, or driving, like True. I wish it were merit based. And,
so everyone else would get off the fucking road.
Yes, and get their driving license pulled. But yeah, so to some extent it is merit based. But then of course there's the counterpoint to that. Is there's all these influencers, and it's a reflection of the values and perspectives of the consumers who consume and give these people their voice. Right? There's a large quantity of undiscerning people for whom they don't actually want.
Here's the thing: they figure it out in time. So part of it is they have to be patient. The influencers which I'll call people who are in the social media world, who have long legs in this business, are there because they've earned it, right? I mean, I don't think Supercar Blondie, no offense to her, I've never met her and never watched anything she's ever done, but I know the way her business works, and I'll give her credit for this. Apparently, allegedly, as I've been told, she's paid to present new cars. Great. She gets millions of views on that, and that is a really great thing for the car company to have a spokesperson. Right? She's a spokesperson. That's what she does. She's not a reviewer. To the best of my knowledge, don't sue me. I don't watch this stuff. But there are certainly other people, like Jason Fensky is a great example. Engineering Explained. Merit. Motherfucker went and got a degree. Right? He knows his shit. He and I talk not so much recently. Did you just laugh? Oh, he coughed. Like, what the fuck was funny about that? I have to make fun of Paolo. It's been a couple episodes since we tortured him.
At least half an episode. Yeah.
At least, yeah. But, Fensky went out and created this channel called Engineering Explained with no production value. It was him, with a whiteboard, and that was it. But he did his homework and found a way to explain things to people. And bravo for him for making a living at doing that. Farah, who I mentioned, brilliant at what he does. He captures people's attention. He's an amazing we should have him on the show. Podcast host. He just makes you feel so welcome, and it's just so easy to talk to him. But he also has done his homework, right? He has written for magazines. He's experienced a lot of different cars. The ones that irritate me to no end tend to come in with a flash and go out. And they're there because they have daddy's money, typically. And so they can buy their way into an audience, or, buy their way to a car that gets them attention. And then they fade away, they go away and fuck off. And so you just got to be patient. But for us, I mean, I'm just going to keep learning. It's my plan. And the public figure thing, thorn, but I like the rose. So I like to get to play with cars. I love to get to interact with the engineers. I'm going on Wednesday to go drive the Braptor. That's fucking awesome. Who else is saying, I'm going to get in a plane on Wednesday to go drive a Bronco Raptor that's not out yet? Fuck yeah.
So counsel to people.
Go back in time and start over and devote your life to this craft.
What if someone is a really dyed-in-the-wool enthusiast and has already done that?
Then if they've experienced, my genuine advice to people, without the whole fuck you, go back in time and do it over again, prove yourself by creating a product. Right. So if you're looking to, how do I get a job at a car magazine? Write an article and submit it in. But make sure you have a voice and make sure you understand what you're writing for. I mean, if I ever see a first person anything in a magazine article, it's just thrown out right away. You don't matter. You as the author are a chameleon. Your style can be in there and your comedy can be in there, ingrained in the writing. But your writing needs to be crystal clear, and it's not about you. It's about the car. Yes. And that's the biggest mistake that most people make. Second biggest mistake is getting to the point 6 paragraphs in. I'm super guilty of that. Bearing the lead, as it's called. But then really honing your craft as a writer. because at the end of the day, everything we do comes down to writing. Icons is a written show. Revelations is a written show. BTS with DTS is a written show.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want non-written shit, this is what you got. See? Difference?
It's just this like incoherent babbling about miscellaneous topics. And I think a big part of that is that you have to read a lot, and you read a lot, and then you start to identify what you do and don't like and how other people solve problems. And I love going back and reading old magazines for this reason. I mean, Mel Nichols' stuff is just recognized still as some of the most epic sort of like reportage, I guess is what they call it, where he's using the car and it's going places and doing things, and he's putting you there in a way that's very immersive, in the most immersive way that you could have done in the 70s or 80s before. Now video well done has the power to do the same thing, and that's why it's so compelling, and I think becoming the dominant form of car media, which is justifiable because cars make noises and are visual. And so
what was that Billy Joel song line?
Oh God, Billy Joel. I'm not going to know.
Come on, that was in your 50s.
Old white people music. Come on.
There's a line of, why read it in the magazine when you can get the same sound from the story in your magazine aimed at your average teen? What's the matter with the car I'm driving? Can you tell that it's out of style? Okay.
I mean, I believe that it happened.
The point was, why would you read a review of a song where you can just fucking listen to it yourself? And that's why video works so well for cars. You can listen to me wax poetic about the incredible combustion noises coming from the blood, or you can hear it. And I can make fun of it in a funnier way than the car can make fun of itself. But short of that, you're better off just hearing it yourself, which is why video wins.
Yep.
But the video stuff has to be produced. I mean, it takes, you know this, a long time. So if you want to get into the video stuff, learn the craft of storytelling using sight, sound, and motion. The next person I see that sends me a video that's just a bunch of ethereal shit, as a like, wow, I did a review and it's ethereal shit with 3 words in it. No, that's not a review. That's just a piece of art. Great. That's not a review. It's a piece of art. Or the, hi there, I'm driving this, blah, 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 and just vomits a road test, that's not video either. And that's self-limiting, unless you do something different, right? So I stand here in the studio. We are in the Revelation studio, and that's over there. I stand here in a studio and read lines that I wrote. BTS is you reading a voiceover that you wrote. The reason people are watching it is they get to see the car, sight, sound, and motion. They hear it and see it, and then they're learning something from the words you're speaking. But you're not delivering those words deadpan to a camera. I mean, this is the typical automotive reviewer. I'm there and it rides really good and the shifter is nice and the steering's great. I don't need to hear that. And if there's anything you can show me, this is what we do all the time in icon scripting. As I work with Anthony and we're like, all right, this is the point I want to make. I don't want to say the words. How do we show it? I'll be talking about something else and you'll come away with the idea that this thing is a great drift car without me ever using the words or saying that. So video is another layer on top of it because that's learning how to use cameras and motion to tell us, and music and sound design and all that other stuff to tell a story. And I'm still learning that. I mean, that's why I have Anthony and Rob and my whole team. They're amazing at that. But the basic story comes down to the cars. But research, more research, more research.
Yeah. Finding the right resource. And when there's not the right resource to tell a car story, then it's like, how do you tell? You have to
make it
figure out. Or let the car speak for itself.
That was the greatest challenge of being a journalist. You get on a plane, you fly to Europe, and you drive the new milk toast Wassa cracker. Make it fucking interesting, right? You went on the trip, you flew there, you drove the car, you have to come back with a story. Find one. Make it interesting. That's a bitch. Yeah. But you got to do it. I mean, there was some of the stories that came out of the most boring cars were the best, but I got to find an angle. I have to find something to talk about. Even if it's just, how soul sucking and sad the state of the industry is, because it is. Sometimes you got to just talk about that. But then don't just say there's nothing to say here. I mean, I did that once on an Insta review. I said, Mama said, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, ... That was it. And like 50 blank lines. Hashtag Cammisa verdict.
What car?
I don't remember. As I was telling them, like, fuck, what the hell was that? But yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, my approach also is with something that's extraordinary, something that people don't necessarily are not likely to experience, then my target is always to try and convey the feelings that come with that. For me, it's a very emotional, sort of subjective thing. That's why enthusiasts are drawn to cars, because we want an experience of some kind. They want to feel something. So absent, the full background story, you have to at least convey the feeling that the car creates.
Right. Which is, I go back to Gene Jennings, who was the editor-in-chief of Automotive when I got there. And the first review, a bad review I wrote, she was like, the fuck are you doing? No one wants to hear you whining. Like, give them a good time. And I was like, yeah, but the car sucks. She's like, doesn't matter. Give them a good time. Celebrate the fucking car. Celebrate what it does well, and then laugh about the shit that it didn't. And so instead of a bitch fest, it comes back as a really funny piece where I said all the same things, slammed the car, but celebrated the fact that
this is like one of my favorite articles ever that I've read is about the 2002 Escalade, whatever the Avalanche Escalade was.
EXT, was it?
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
And the concluding line is, there are many ways you could spend $42,500 or whatever the thing cost. This is one of them.
Was that John Phillips for Car and Driver?
I can't remember
because it sounds something.
I have to find the article, because I was reading something else we were on a long road trip, and I was reading the article about, same author did a minivan, 4-wheel drive minivan comparison in like 1992 between the Mazda MPV and the Ford Aerostar and the Chevy Astro and whatever other 4-wheel drive. And like they went on the Dalton Highway, which is this 400-mile long, like not paved highway in Alaska that has one fuel stop at like the 170-mile mark, and it goes inside the Arctic Circle, and they like took them there. And the article was just uproarious. And I was like, what else did the guy write?
All right, now we're going to find out whether this is Phillips or not. Because John Phillips was always my favorite author, because every single story had me burst out laughing at some point. He always went to stupid places with stupid cars, did stupid shit with it, made me laugh, and he just got hired back to Car and Driver. So I'm going to have to eat my words a little bit if this isn't him, but that smacks of Phillips. He is apparently nuts, but
but in the best way. So are you?
Way. No, I'm not apparently nuts.
Yes.
Completely nuts.
Well, only because we know each other, right? You have to use that word apparently if it's not somebody that you have.
No, that's allegedly.
Allegedly.
You are allegedly in a field with a pole. I am.
Well, now we're back to the beginning, which means the episode must be over.
Goodbye.
All right.
The best way to end it. Just kidding. No.